Welcome to Inspirations TV, where our intention is not only to inspire you, but to offer you helpful tools and resources to assist you in living a fulfilling life in all areas. Today, we'll be discussing the role of self-worth in communication with licensed therapist Melvin Gaddy. Melvin Gaddy is a licensed online therapist from North Carolina and founder of Gold Aura Therapy. His journey as a therapist has spanned from college counseling centers, helping ambitious students at PWIs and HBCUs through anxiety, family issues, relationships, and personal development. He specializes in helping professional Black women create thriving and fulfilling relationships, feel more confident, put themselves first, and to take control of their mental health through online therapy and coaching. In addition to his practice, Melvin is also creating a group for African American men to help them process the stress, trauma, and daily challenges of being a Black man in America. He is also working with recovering substance users to develop healthy habits and rebuild the life that they desire. All right, and welcome to the show, licensed therapist all the way from Durham, North Carolina, Melvin Gaddy. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. I'm glad to be here. I'm excited about it. So yeah, thank you.
Definitely. Thank you so much. So today we're going to be discussing, self-worth as it, ties into communication, which I find really interesting. I've not really discussed communication on the level of self-worth yet on the show, so I'm really excited to delve into this. So to start, as we're seeing, there's still a good amount of stigmas as it relates to therapy still these days, but we are slowly but surely breaking down these barriers a lot, with Taraji show, really kind of breaking new ground here as well. So tell me from a therapist standpoint, why do you really feel like that is particular? Because I thought it was just something in the Black community, but I feel like it's every community has their little things. But why, what's your take on that as a therapist of why you feel like we still have that kind of block there?
I've seen just a lot of misconceptions about what it is, what a therapist actually does, what our purpose is. I think there's been a long standing idea that, you go to a therapist, that means you're crazy or something like that, or that something's wrong with you.
Right.
And I feel like people are starting to gravitate away from that, and people are starting to be more aware of, I got stuff on my mind that I need to get out. So they're becoming more open, but I think there's just a lot of work, a lot of mindset that has to be undone first, because for so long people have said counseling and therapy means this thing.
Right.
So, something people want to stray away from. Nobody wants to admit that they're struggling with something. Nobody wants to think oh, something's wrong with me, even though it's not.
Right.
Nobody wants that idea of if I'm going here, does that mean I've failed at something? Does that mean something is wrong? So I think kind of on a big scale, that's why the stigma exists. And then I feel like if you go into different specific cultures, then the reasoning gets a little bit more detailed.
Yeah.
Specific to those.
I like what you said, because I feel like that's going to really tie into today's message of the self-worth component when it comes to communicating our feelings and really just getting our points across, our perspectives across. So I understand you work a lot with women of color. Why did you find this to be so particularly important for your practice?
That's a good question. It's also a big question. So I specifically focus on Black women, and the reason for that was because I work with a lot. I guess to preface it, I've worked with a lot of different people, and during my time in counseling, I've worked in college counseling centers. So working with a variety of different students. White, Asian, Hispanic, Black. Also, I work with all of those. I've done work with people from substance use communities, and so they come from all different walks of life.
Sure.
And I've had the chance to experience all those areas, but throughout my career, when I started working with Black women more, I had a period of time where I was kind of my main client base.
Oh, wow.
And so for me, you asked why it's important. It's important for me because, one, I feel like that's where I do some of my best work, and I see a lot of great connection there. But I think more importantly than that, I had a realization. I started to recognize that a lot of Black women kind of have their own unique challenges and struggles that don't really get spoken about, that don't get heard, that don't get acknowledged. And so uh, the more I started to learn about that and started to get a little bit more immersed in it, I was like, wow, I can't believe that they're kind of carrying all this stuff, but nobody really, they don't feel like they can also talk about it. And if they do try to talk about it, people act like they don't want to hear it. And so they kind of their voice gets muffled. So it could be from, speaking up with things with their family, trying to deal with things in their professional settings, kind of being stifled in their relationships and all those areas where they feel like I got something to get out and they never feel like they could. And so I feel like the work was important because once I started to notice that, in contrast, I saw like all of this potential that they had that was kind of, like I said earlier, being stifled. And so, I wanted to be at least one of the people that helped bring that out and kind of show them you can be this person that you want to be. You can say the things that you want to say and how you want to say them, and it's okay. Because there's a lot of judgment that I've learned that Black women experience when they're just in their day-to-day life. They just are constantly trying to avoid being judged or being criticized or being shamed for something. And so, type person I am, I'm just like, it's about being yourself. Like the more you can be yourself, I feel like the happier you will be. And that's just kind of like one of my ways of life that I practice. And, I wanted to try to incorporate that into other women's lives and help them kind of grab onto that and but more so give them a place to learn how to do it. Yeah.
I think that's a good lead in for my next question, because what is it that you feel like are some of like maybe the top, maybe like 2 to 3 issues like that people, come into your office about that just kind of are really just plaguing them and they're just trying to figure out a way to, navigate through those?
Yeah. I mean, I know one of the primary ones is usually always about relationships in some form.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's family, but a lot of times it's romantic. And, it can range from like breakups. It can range from past trauma in relationships, or it could stem from just like, I'm single and I want to figure out how to not be single, but living a single life is hard. It's complicated. It's just tricky and it's frustrating. And so it's like, they just come to me trying to figure out how do I do this? And what am I missing? And so I think that's where the dynamic piece kicks in, because, if I'm, working with women who are trying to have a relationship with a man, then
sure,
who else to talk to? And so, granted, I can help anybody with any of their relationships, but I think, a lot of women appreciate that male perspective when it comes to understanding men, because like I always say, men are simple, but they're complicated at the same time.
Sure.
And if you understand those complicated parts, they become extremely simple. And it's like, you'll be able to see exactly what's happening and understand exactly why you're feeling a certain way, why he's acting a certain way. Just giving them that opportunity to make more informed decisions. So relationships is a big one that comes up, and just navigating them and also improving them and being able to sustain them.
Right.
Sometimes I do come across people who are in relationships and they're just like, it's been good, but now it's kind of like it's a little shaky, and they are trying to figure out what to do about it. And so, just that whole general category of relationships is huge, which is understandable because they are complicated and they're hard to understand. But they're like a primary part of our life. Like we're social people, relationship beings. And so, we're going to be in one way or the other. And
right.
So it helps to know how to go about them. Aside from that, I would say like setting boundaries which kind of goes along with it, but it kind of extends into not only the relationships, but even like the workplace,
okay.
Friends and stuff and family, and just their lifestyle, like saying, I'm doing too many things, but I had this goal over here, but all this stuff that I'm doing is blocking me from achieving my real goal in life. So like learning how to set boundaries, whether physically or verbally, just how to, say them on a consistent basis and understand what they are. So that's like a huge one in setting those boundaries.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I see it's extremely common. And then I think if I gave you a third one, it would just be needing an outlet and being able to feel heard and understood, because a lot of women that I work with, they're ambitious, so they're like working towards a lot in their life, and they're very like assertive and headstrong. And so a lot of times with things they're doing and the personality that they have, a lot of people just don't understand it. And they might be succeeding at a high level in different parts of their life, and so they've kind of left people behind a little bit. So when they want to express a challenge that they're having, people will either assume, oh, you got all this, there's no way that you're struggling with something, or they just don't know how to relate. Like they just don't know how to relate to her. And on the outside, it looks like she's doing good, but on the inside, I mean, she might be breaking down, and she might just be barely making it. So those are like the top three that I would say, like relationships, setting those boundaries, and just trying to have an outlet so that they can feel understood for once.
Yes. I think that's so huge, because I feel like relationships, it's one of those things, like whether, you have all kinds of relationships in your life, you know what I mean? And communication is a big part of any of those.
That's true.
And I remember I was watching this one show a while back, and one of the things they said is that it was like this couple that was having some issues in their marriage, and the therapist said to them, okay, do you guys want to work on these issues together, or do you want to work on them apart? And I'm like, oh, that's a good one, because like a lot of times we feel like the solution is just in switching relationships, but it's still an inside job, you know what I mean? So like, what are the things like you feel like for relationships, like where the communication starts to like kind of creep in and just like really kind of like rear its ugly head? Like, what are some of those like areas of where that I feel like, even like with the communication too, and like you said, the setting of the boundaries, that really is going to tie into self-worth. And I think that that's something that subconsciously maybe that we're aware of, but it's not really fully realized, or we don't know how to articulate that. Where do you feel like that all kind of like starts to tie in together and show up?
If you look at how relationships progress, I think that's where it starts. It starts off from that very early stage.
Yes.
Because that sets the tone. I think that's a big part of it. I mean, a part of it starts individually, like your life experiences and what you've been conditioned to do and not do. But when we talk about a specific relationship, that those early stages, those first few weeks, few months, those kind of do set the tone for how you're going to view yourself in that relationship, and also how that person's going to view you.
Yes.
And so if you start off in the right way in the very beginning, you kind of set the tone like, listen, this is how I communicate. This is what I need in this relationship for us to be on the same page. You start off like that, then it's more likely to continue like that. But if you start off, but what tends to happen is people get in relationships feeling good, they're happy, and that happiness is a little bit blinding. So there's like, oh, okay, well, we're not really having any problems because, we don't have anything to have problems about yet.
Yeah, honeymoon phase. Yeah,
that honeymoon phase.
Yeah.
And so a lot of stuff is getting missed. A lot of things would be like, okay, I'm not gonna worry about that. That was just a one-time thing. But those little things in the beginning, they may go away, but they don't go away. They start adding up. And so then when you find yourself down the road, you haven't established that those things bothered you. You haven't established a dynamic of, if I have an issue, here's how I say it. Or if there's just something I need, here's how I say it. Hasn't been established. So then when you start trying to say it, the person's like, what are you doing? Like, where are you coming from that way? And so then you start thinking, like, question yourself, like, oh, wait, am I doing something wrong? Like, so then you start having those thoughts. And so then when you start thinking about your self-worth, it starts coming off as like, well, maybe I'm not supposed to say anything. And maybe I should just let it go. And then you start accepting things that you don't want to accept because you feel like that's how it's supposed to be.
And then the resentment starts to creep in.
Yeah, exactly. Resentment starts to creep in, and you start to say like, well, I didn't say it before, so I can't say it now. And if I say something, they're going to get upset or they're going to start acting funny. So you start holding on to stuff. Then that stuff you hold on to piles up and then comes out later for another situation.
Right.
So, an unrelated situation. And so then at that point, it's like you're on two different pages at this point.
Yeah.
And nothing has been established on how to like neutralize that. And not to say that it can't happen and you can create it, you can still do it.
Yeah.
But the reason a lot of people get stuck in that cycle because from the very beginning, one, it wasn't established. Two, they never learned it. A lot of people just never learned it. So like I know for me, when I was in a relationship early on in I think it was our first date or something like that. And we were out to eat. And I don't know where they got this idea, but they tried to tell me what I was going to order. They was like, I'm going to get this and you can get that. And then we can share it. I was like, I'm going to be honest with you. We're not going to do that. Like, I'm gonna food. And if this is what you would like to have, you get that. But this is what I'm going to get over here. And I was like, oh, they're trying to tell me what I'm going to eat. But, you know, in their past experiences, that's what they're used to being able to do.
Right.
Stuff. And so we established that in the beginning. And from that moment, it was like, okay, I guess I won't be telling him what he's going to eat. And have that problem anymore. And we were able to talk about it and move on and still enjoy the day and still enjoy, you know, the rest of our relationship. So that's like kind of a prime example of the earlier you do it and the earlier you establish it, the easier it makes things down the road. But I think the thing is, if you've never learned how to do it in the beginning, you don't even know how to establish it in the first place. And so thinking about that concept in relation to like self-worth, when you get in that environment, you start to get a little bit more withdrawn and start feeling like, I don't know, it starts to kind of resonate as, well, maybe I'm not, this is all that I'm worth now. And I can't ask for more, and I won't ask for more because what's the point? And so that's how it starts tying in and connecting to each other. So
definitely, that reminds me. I was listening to this audiobook called "Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself" with Dr. Joe Dispenza, who's a neuroscientist. And one of the chapters he discusses like our emotional contracts with people, or our energetic contracts with people, and how, you know, very much like how you described, like you've been a certain way, you've established like this is how I am and who I am in this relationship. And then once those resentments start to kind of like creep in, and they're suppressed, they're not expressed, you're just suppressed. So you're aware of them. So like certain things that wouldn't really get on your nerves, like kind of start getting on your nerves because you have all these associations of what that means and what that represents in your life. And I thought what was so interesting is he kind of tells this story of, you know, this woman that one day she says, you know, in her head, she says like, enough. So she starts speaking up for herself and she starts saying like, well, I don't like that. I don't want that. Or no, I'm going to do this. This is what I'm going to do. And, you know, her husband and friends start to go, you know, what's wrong with her? You know, I liked her the other way. You know, what happened? And so they all kind of came together because they all had this emotional contract with her. And they all kind of like convinced her that, you know, you need to see a psychiatrist, and like got her on some medication. And then she just kind of like withdrew and like went back to her old self. And they're like, see, she's better now, you know? And it's like, when I heard that, I'm like, oh my God, isn't that, you know, what people do? And we think that maybe something's wrong with that other person. It's just like, no, you just, I mean, maybe yes, you know, maybe there is something wrong. And I use the word wrong in quotations because I know like a lot of people like have some issues with like, oh, so I'm wrong. Like, kind of take the stigma away from it. There's just certain things that you might want to change. So you might want to consider the possibility that there, you know, is another way to go about it. And and just like to start renegotiating those contracts. And that can be a really tough thing because some people don't want to change that contract. They're like, no, we established that you ordered this and I ordered that and then we share it and or whatever it is, it's usually a lot more complicated than that because it gets into like a control aspect. But I love that because it's really kind of tying into just like setting boundaries. How is a way that people can kind of start to kind of like change those, I guess, emotional contracts, if we're going to call it that for the sake of this conversation. What are some good, let's start here. What are some of the ways that people kind of like try to do it that's maybe not constructive, and and then like on the flip side, like what are ways that they can go about it? Because I know like sometimes like people kind of come off a certain way and that can kind of impact the situation.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good question though. I like that term, emotional contracts, 'cause I think that's a good way to describe it. I like that. A lot of those situations, what I think people try to do, they have an internal realization that they don't like it anymore. Yeah. And then they try to start doing it like, hey, I'm not taking this anymore. And they're too abrupt.
Yeah.
And like you said, if you already had this contract or this establishment with this other person, it's just gonna blindside them. And so a lot of times people they're too abrupt with it or not direct enough about it.
Yeah.
So if you're too abrupt, it's gonna push the person back. It's like, wait, what you doing? I'm not, you better relax.
Right.
You'll get that energy. Or if you're indirect, you'll try to like start, communicating more and saying different things that you're feeling. But if it's not directed, the person's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, what are you getting at?
Right.
And so you're gonna be met with confusion or maybe even some dismissal a little bit.
Yeah. Change that contract. They're like, no, we established that you ordered this and I ordered that and then we share it and or whatever it is, it's usually a lot more complicated than that because it gets into like a control aspect. But I love that because it's really kind of tying into just like setting boundaries. How is a way that people can kind of start to kind of like change those, I guess, emotional contracts, if we're going to call it that for the sake of this conversation. What are some good, let's start here. What are some of the ways that people kind of like try to do it that's maybe not constructive, and and then like on the flip side, like what are ways that they can go about it? Because I know like sometimes like people kind of come off a certain way and that can kind of impact the situation.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good question though. So then showing resentment, maybe becoming passive aggressive.
Yes.
A better way to describe it.
Yeah.
So they'll say like, I'm not gonna say this, but I'm gonna do some things to make you realize I got something to say, that I want something to change. Right. And so I think passive aggressive behavior is the best way to describe it. So those are like some of the top three things I see when somebody has realized that they're just tired of it, or that they want to start doing something different, but they feel like they can't. And I'm pretty sure there are more, but those are the top three that come to my mind. Yeah. Now, in terms of like how to switch that, I think one of the best ways is like just creating some type of, it's like ironically communicating about it, but in a way that is not as like pressuring and forceful. And so what I mean by that is saying like, if you realize that like the communication has not been going well and you want to be able to express some more of your needs and get on the same page, then I think a helpful way to approach it is to say like, is bring the person aside and say, hey, listen, this is some things that I've been thinking about. Yeah. And some things that I've been feeling, really focusing on yourself, saying this is what I've been feeling.
Right.
And I want us to find some time to discuss this. Yeah, it doesn't have to be today, but I want us to set aside some time to just kind of talk about like what's been going on so we can get on the same page. And then at that point, you're not like attacking the person, because in most cases the person feels attacked or they just feel blindsided. But in that scenario, when you come at them like that, it allows them to be a little bit more receptive and say like, okay, it's not me, it's something that he or she is feeling.
Right.
that I want to work on, that they want to work on for us.
Right.
So I think coming at it from that angle, it just helps open their mind a little bit more. They're more willing to hear it. And then I think once you kind of take that first step, that's when, like I said, the directness comes in, saying like you have to be direct and clear about like, this is what's been going on and this is what's happened, but today and now, like here's what I've been missing and here's what I need to feel like whatever I'm trying to feel. And then in order to do that, I think it would be good for us to do, X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
Like being very clear and saying like, here's what I'm feeling now and here's what I'm looking for. And like, here's how I want to approach changing it. How you feel about that, saying that to the person.
Right.
And so now it's a collaborative thing, not a,
yes.
It's not like you're combating, I guess collaborative instead of combative.
Yeah.
And so that is one of the best ways that I see to kind of help open that up a little bit and get two people on board. Because if you feel like you can work, if two people feel like they can work together,
right,
you're more likely to get to an understanding instead of saying like, here's what I want, here's what I need, we need to do this now. That's not gonna work. So, yeah, I think that's I hope that answers your question.
It does, because it's just like, it's kind of giving me like a lot of epiphanies too, of just kind of like how, whether it was a romantic relationship or friendships, I felt like for me personally, it was a little bit more difficult establishing that in friendships.
Yeah.
Because, like with romantic relationships, you feel like you have sort of like these like rights. Like I'm the girlfriend, I'm the, whatever it is, I'm the boyfriend, I can ask this or whatever.
Right.
And like with friendships, I found that like particularly more kind of like tricky, just because it's like, there's no lead like per se, you know what I mean? It's not like one person has to take the lead per se, but it's one of those things like where I'm like thinking about like a past friendship where there were just some things that person was doing that were not very cool, and just trying to like approach that situation and like really always kind of feeling like it's not the right time, or how do I go about this, you know what I mean? It's not like you know what I mean, it's not like where in a relationship like you live together, so it's just like I have to say something, there's like a sense of like urgency there. But with a friend, it's not necessarily that way. And I was just trying to like talk to her in ways that were I mean direct in a way, but indirect in a way of like how you're kind of describing it. I would kind of like use examples of things that I had, done in past situations to that were similar to our dynamic, that were unhealthy. And kind of like you said before, it was like, it was just completely going over her head. Like if she was not making the connection between like, oh yeah, I do that with you. And that's, it's just kind of like this thing of like, well, that was your situation and I don't know what you're talking, like she didn't get it. So I had to be like very direct, just like, look, this whole like situation that's going on, like that doesn't work. Like, so just tell me kind of like what's going on with you, whatever. And in that situation, I found that while I had the tools to do it, there was an element for me of self-worth of can I ask for that? Like, do I have the, you know what I mean? That was kind of the subtext, but I wasn't really even thinking about it like that, because it's like, well, she's been doing it all this time. I'm gonna like go in and change it. Like, oh, like, is it going to be like this argument or what have you? And so I want to like go deeper into like the communication aspect of this, because I don't think we realize like how much, she was taking everything I was saying like as attack, even though I was like talking to her very like conversationally, like how we are right now.
Right.
But because she didn't have those tools, it was just like, I think one of the things she said is like, well, it just sounds like, I'm just like this horrible person. And it's just like, why would you jump to that? Like, just have a collaboration with it. Like, and I didn't use the word collaboration, but it's just like, let's have a dialogue about it. That was kind of like how I was going about it.
Yeah.
But how did, like, let's go deeper into that. Like, what are some of the, like, the other things that you notice in terms of like the self-worth aspect that, you know, kind of prevent people from really reaching a resolution? Because it wasn't like I just wanted to sit there and bitch. Like, that wasn't the point. I was saying, like, this is what's happening. I don't like it. Here's why. You know, how would you feel in this situation? Like, it, you know, like how you felt in that situation with that other friend. You know, and it was just like this complete shutdown. What's beneath all of that? Because there's a shutdown thing that happens, and you know, I know that's not really like one particular question, but hopefully like, you can follow my train of thought there.
No, I hear where you're going. I mean, you make a good distinction also about like romantic relationships and friendships, because they are different.
Yeah.
And how you approach them is different. And I think the level of like quote unquote obligation that you have is different. So that does make the approach, I think it does alter the approach a little bit.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I hear what you're saying in terms of when you're like addressing something or somebody, and you kind of see that shutdown mode, or they start to personalize things.
Yes.
And what it really comes to is, I mean, it's just it's a slight sense of, you know, insecurity. And I think we all have those. We all have a little bit of insecurity, and I think on a baseline level, most of us don't want to disappoint people, and we don't want to feel like we have disappointed somebody and we're less than. And so when you're like bringing something up to somebody, and the whole time they've been thinking like everything's been good, and you're saying, well, actually they have not been good.
Right.
Now this internal reflection, like, oh wait, so it does go to the extreme of like, oh, I'm a terrible person. That's extreme. But in reality, that's them not wanting to take responsibility.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's these kind of two different factors of, oh wow, I've disappointed somebody.
Right.
That hurts. But then not acknowledging like, okay, you know what, I disappointed you. I didn't know I was doing that. Just accepting it.
Right.
Then they try to flip it around and say like, well, I'm just this terrible person. I didn't know you felt that way. Things like that. That shutdown mode, that's them not wanting to accept responsibility.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times now where that comes from, you know, it's hard to say because it's different for everybody.
Right.
But it's also a common trait that people have until you learn how to just take that L and say, I messed up. But we always want to like be right. We always want to prove ourselves. We want to be right. We want to say, well, what about this? What about that?
Right.
Because when somebody's like telling you something about yourself that's not positive,
right,
it does make you feel kind of a little bit minimized. It makes you feel, I don't know, kind of childlike, like a parent is coming down on you.
Yes, right.
And we don't want to feel that, so we try to push back against that. And so some people withdraw and shut down so that they can just block it out and make you feel bad, or they're just like, they just won't acknowledge it. And so, you know, I feel like some of it just comes from just the way we're conditioning as we grow, and this idea of, you know, don't let anybody like attack you. And but it's misperceived because you bring something up. It's not an attack. It can be depending on how you deliver it.
Right.
But it's not necessarily an attack.
Right.
And so see, I think we're talking about self-worth too, and I think that plays a role because for the person who's on the receiving end, if they feel like, oh man, well, I'm not really worth all the good that comes my way. I'm not, you know, I don't deserve a lot. If you feel that way, then when somebody's like bringing something up to you, then it kind of gets highlighted and emphasized. Like, you know what, this is proof that I don't deserve this. This is I must be a bad person. It's confirming that.
Right.
And so when you're on that receiving end, those are some thoughts that can run through your mind. If you're the person like wanting to say something, it's kind of in the same realm as like, it's this question of, should I say it?
Right.
Like, should I just accept what I'm getting? Cause like, at least I'm getting something.
Wow.
Or, if I have a friend, like, should I even say anything? Like, they don't even care about what I have to say anyway. like they're not gonna understand. Then all those thoughts start running through your mind.
Yeah.
And in reality, it's like whatever you do, whatever you have to say does matter. If this person is really your friend,
Right.
then they will support and encourage whatever you have to say.
Right.
But if your mind is not in the right place and
Yeah.
you haven't like fully kind of, found that confidence in yourself or that, built that worth up,
Yes.
you're going to question that. And so
Right.
you'll hinder yourself back, or you'll just kind of internalize or personalize, whichever side you're on.
Right.
But that comes from like years and years of life, childhood,
Sure.
teenage years. Like if you were like bullied as a kid or something like that and you never got past it, that can like kind of get reinforced later in your adult years. If you were like neglected as a kid by your mom or your dad or your caretaker and they just never made you feel loved,
Yeah.
that can manifest like that too.
It's so true. I love that so much because like you're saying other things, like giving me like all these other like epiphanies, which is like one of the things that I hear. And because like when I've like kind of revisited a conversation with someone, like if they weren't particularly receptive the first time or the most recent time that I brought it up, I say like, so what was going, it's like, so what was going on with you? Have you like thought about our last conversation? And, one of the things I hear is like, well, I was taking it personally. And, but there was no like elaboration of, but what does that mean? Because I think there's like, I don't know what exactly the distinction is that needs to be made between, someone personalizing something versus like, because if you're saying it and they're the ones doing like, X, whatever this thing is, that's, that's not very healthy and it's not very fulfilling or cathartic or whatever, whatever it is that, you're looking to, experience. But at the same time, like I wasn't personally like attacking her, but I did want her to take it personally in that like it does involve her, but I wasn't, you know what I mean? Like I don't know what is the distinction, because I feel like there's like some like ego tricks in the brain that's kind of, you know what I mean, saying like, oh well, I took it personal, like because a lot of the things that we hear sometimes is that when someone's saying something to you, like that has to do with them, it doesn't have to do with us. And I think sometimes our egos kind of manipulate that statement. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a tricky one because it happens so quickly and so naturally. So it does make it tricky. And I mean, human nature, if you're saying something to me, I'm gonna assume it's about me. Like if you're saying something that I contributed to, then I'm gonna assume it's about me.
Right.
And so the mind does bring that in. I think part of it's human nature. And kind of separating from that, it takes some, you got to be intentional about it to say, okay, like, is this about me? Like, where is this coming from? And investigating, like, where is this coming from?
Right.
I also think a part of it is on the person who's delivering the message, because if you deliver it as, this is your fault, well then, I'm gonna take it like it's my fault, and that's gonna like, I'm gonna react however I feel like I want to react.
Sure.
So I think it's a two-way street though, because
the
person has to be clear about, okay, this thing happened,
right,
and because of your actions, that's why this thing happened. And I don't like this thing. It's not that I don't like you. I don't like the thing. So that distinction has to be made. The person though has to be willing to say, okay, I'm willing to understand that and accept that. And so sometimes, like I said, we want to go straight to, so what you trying to say about me? Like we try to go there, we miss the point. And that's generally because like all we're hearing is feedback and we're ready to like defend ourselves. Instead of hear the person. And so but I mean, I think it's just human nature. Trying to protect ourselves, trying to protect our emotions. And so we go into that defense mode quick. And so it takes, like I said before, it takes intentionality to be able to say, like, let me slow down for a second.
Right.
Hear what they're saying. Let me get more information.
Yes.
So it's until you acknowledge that about yourself and you know that You
Right.
just know that it's hard to counteract it. Like you're just gonna do your normal response, which is
Right.
do something negative. You're going to
Dismissive,
yeah,
passive aggressive, projecting, yeah, all that stuff.
yeah. And then more so if it hits on something that you are already, not feeling confident in about yourself, already a little sensitive about it in yourself. If it hits on that,
Yeah.
then it's gonna kind of push that button a
Right.
little bit harder, and then you're gonna feel you're gonna feel attacked about something that the person wasn't even attacking, but because you've been feeling it and it's been swirling in your head, it's
Yes.
gonna activate, and now you be like, oh, so now you're trying to say what I do, and the person's like, I ain't never say anything about that. I
Yeah.
just said I don't like this. They're like, nah, but if you're talking about this, you probably talking about this too, and so then all these things start coming up,
Yeah.
and now it's it's a bigger conflict than it had to be. And
Yeah.
so, I guess to more specifically answer your question, I think when someone is holding on and harboring those things that they never dealt with, or that we just are all in general, we all have different things that we're sensitive towards about ourselves. If it's
Right.
all that's touched on, it comes out. And so it's very important to understand like who you are and who you aren't. You got to know both.
Yes.
We want to be these people in life, and
Right.
sometimes this is not who you are. You got to figure out who you actually are, who you are, and be okay with that. So
Right.
then when somebody is saying something to you, you're like, okay, well, that's not me. Like, I already know that's not who I am, but I do know who I am. And if I feel like you're attacking my character, then I'm gonna clarify first.
Yeah.
And if you are attacking my character, then we'll go there. But if you're not, then it's like, okay, I'll let that go. But
Right.
yeah, it's a lot of people are walking around with these unidentified feelings and emotions. They haven't identified them yet. So they're just kind of floating around waiting to be activated. And so I think when you see that come out from like relationships, family, friends, all those people, that's when it happens because they just been holding it on and packing it in and trying to live day to day without addressing it. And so, you might say something that's completely unrelated, but to them it is related. So
Right. I feel like in those conversations, and I'm going to take a page out of like Oprah's book because I love this saying too. She says, every conversation, every argument, really comes down to, did you hear me? Do you see me? And does what I say matter to you?
Oh yeah.
Do I matter?
Yeah.
And if people can just really kind of come from that perspective of, I forgive you, not the behavior.
Yeah.
When people can do that, I really feel like it just changes the whole trajectory of what can be.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like from like whether it's a fight, it could actually become like this healing cathartic,
It can be. It can be, yeah. Yeah. I think I like what you're saying about that. I think those elements do need to be there, like you were saying.
Yeah.
But also the realization that it's a temporary thing. Like
Right.
we're going to have misunderstandings.
Right.
It's gonna happen. We don't all come from the same place.
Right.
So, the quicker you're able to realize that we're different sometimes, we're gonna have a misunderstanding. But if we're both willing to say, did you hear me and did you understand me and did it matter? I like that. If you're able to have those things, you're right. It can make it go so much. It will make it go so much smoother. But too many people. We have too much pride and ego wrapped in ourselves that it gets in the way. That's what it just gets in the way.
Right.
Yeah.
It's so true. Oh man, I love that. What are some because I feel like a lot of times I was reading this meme, it was funny. It was saying something to the, I'm gonna butcher it of course, but I'll get the gist of it, which is, sometimes like we're going to therapy because of all the other people who don't go to therapy in our lives. And I'm like, that's a really very accurate statement. What are like some tips for kind of like for people, one, like to find like what are some good traits to make sure that you have in a therapist? And then I'll go into like what are some ways that people can make sure they benefit the most from therapy, because I think that's also very key.
I think when you're looking for a good therapist, what you want to have is someone who is And granted, there's some specifics that are, each person has their own preferences. But I think overall, someone who is for you and not themselves. And meaning, you know, some therapists like would they can tend to talk more about them and tell you what they want you to know instead of doing what you need.
Right.
Providing the service that you need, not just what fulfills them.
Right.
And so, like for me, I share stories sometimes in my sessions just to like connect the dots sometimes.
Yeah.
But I definitely don't spend I don't spend most of that session talking about me. Like if we're talking for an hour, you should be talking for at least 50 minutes. And so like I'll just come in, you know, here and there when I need to. But some therapists are like, you know, they kind of switch that, and sometimes they talk more than the client does, and that just shouldn't be happening. So you want somebody who's concerned more about what you're trying to get to, what your goals are, and what your issues are.
Right.
About that. Someone who you don't feel judged by. As crazy as it seems, I've heard stories where clients feel judged by their therapist, and I'm like, how does that happen?
Right.
That's like one of the core foundations of things that we learn and that you develop is like not being judgmental.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's human nature to be judgmental.
Yeah.
But when you're in the therapist role, it's like, I don't know, it's something that you have to be able to take off. Like it's weird to say, but I hear a lot of stuff about a lot of people's lives that most people probably like, I couldn't imagine doing that. But you know, I don't judge them. It's like, this is where your life is and we'll work with that.
Right.
And so you need somebody who's willing to say like, I see where you are, I see where you're trying to go.
Yeah.
I know you make these decisions, but they're just that. They're just decisions. You
Right.
can make new decisions.
Right.
So you want somebody who's like who you don't feel judged by. Someone who I guess prompt, follows through. Like I've heard a lot of occasions where clients will be seeking a therapist and they'll call them and the therapist won't answer the phone. They won't return the calls. They won't return the emails.
Mm-hmm.
They just won't follow up, period.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, you know, people coming to you looking for help,
right.
and they try to pay you too.
Right.
You're just gonna like not show up. You're gonna ignore them. I've heard therapists who will set up a consultation call with a client and then not show up to the call themselves. I'm like,
wow.
You know, that's just not a good trait that you want.
I like that. And then like for people who, because I mean, I've known people to go to therapy for a long time and just like not get anything out of it. But then if I kind of like engage more in that dialogue with them, like what were you doing? Like, what were you saying? Like, you guys didn't touch on any of like this is that, you know, that you've been like dealing with. Like you haven't, you know, what are some things that people can do just to like make sure they get the most out of it? Like, because like you said, like we should, you know, the patient should be talking like, you know, 50 minutes.
Yeah.
So if they're not getting anything out of it and the therapist is stepping up to the plate, you know, like what's something that, you know, people can do to like make sure that they're like not just showing up in the seat, but like showing up, you know, internally.
Right. I mean, that's a good question. And that is a very important part of the process is like you yourself. And so from what I've seen, the best way to get the most out of it is like, show up physically, be present, but also be open and honest. A lot of times, as surprising as it may seem, people go to counseling, but they play it safe. Yeah. And they're like, okay, I'm only talking about this stuff that I feel that I've already gotten comfortable talking about. Mm-hmm. And so kind of like they say when you go to the doctor, like if you don't tell the doctor that you having pain somewhere, how can he know to fix it? And so same thing applies in therapy. Like if you don't share the real honest truth and what's really going on, then the therapist they can't read your mind. And so we can't read it. And so we can like, you know, maybe assume and maybe pull it out.
Right.
But being forthcoming with what's going on. I think that's a key. Being consistent with it and just consistently coming. Sometimes people like to go, take breaks. They say, okay, I'm gonna go once or twice this month and I'll come back again in another month or two. I mean, it's gonna be hard to make progress like that. Because the more consistent you are with things and implementing something and practicing, then the better it's gonna become.
Right.
And so I think being as consistent as you're able to be. Sometimes finances play a role, but
Sure.
if you have the resources to stay consistent,
Yeah.
I say, try to go on at least a bi-weekly basis.
Yeah.
And definitely if you're starting off new with a therapist, like trying to get try to be consistent for that first month or so.
Yes.
That's at that point in time, the therapist is still learning you,
Right.
and you're kind of learning each other though. You're kind of learning who each other is and understanding it. And the therapist is formulating how they're gonna like push you forward and help you forward. But they need that time to gather all the information they need to gather and assess things.
Right.
So definitely starting that first month off as strong as you're able to, I think is good.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point, because I mean, I've known people who are like, yeah, well, I could go with this one, like they're in my network, but I really want to go with this one, but I'm gonna have to pay them out of pocket, so I can't go that much. And I'm like, okay, good luck with that. I'm trying not to like be judgmental, but it's at the same time, like if you're gonna go, have like, you guys aren't psychics. You know what I mean? I think that like, is like one of those like weird things of like, oh, well, they're a therapist, I should just know. And like, but you have to give them information. You have to give them intel, and you can't dance around things. And you know what I mean? Like, just sit there with the Kleenex and just like let it out. You know what I mean? Like, and one of the things that I've noticed, like with a couple of people, like they're very like emotionally guarded.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, maybe say that. Maybe say like the things that like make you the most uncomfortable, like say those things, because that's like that's where the information is. That's where they get their intel. That's where they can go in and do their best work with you.
That's so true. Yeah, I like that point, because I mean it's exactly right. And I think a lot of us, including me, we have this understanding that sharing stuff is not easy. And if you've never learned how to articulate the words to say how you're feeling, that's gonna take some time. But I like what you said of just saying like, this is an issue for me. I don't know how to talk about it yet. And maybe I'm not ready to talk about it. I'd even prefer that, just saying like, this exists, I'm not ready. So then at that point, I can say, okay, we're gonna put a pin in that, but now I know about it.
Right.
So we can work on everything else that leads up to you being able to talk about it. So even that helps, even doing that. And so, that's a big point. Like I said, like being forthcoming that's like one of the biggest pieces. And that consistency piece, and also just implementing things into your life. If your therapist is saying like, give this a try. Do it. Just try it. And because the way that you've been doing it, it probably hasn't been working. And so if you have someone else who's trying to like say like, try this out, see if this works for your life now. Even if it doesn't work, at least you try something new, and you'll probably learn something about yourself in the process that you didn't know. So that's what I encourage all my people to do. I was like, you don't have to do a whole lot, just show up for me. So, like, keep it real with me. And be open to challenging yourself. If you can do those things, I can work with the rest.
Definitely. I love that. This has been a great talk. Before I ask my last question, where can everybody find you online?
So the best place to find me right now is on Instagram at mel.gaddy. That's where I tend to show up most often. I mean, if you want to find me on LinkedIn, I don't know if people go there, but if you do, my name's just Melvin Gaddy. You can find me on there too. But you can go check me out. That's where I'm at right now. And I post informational things, occasionally. And so I think if you're looking for some good tips and tidbits about things, that's a good place to go look.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. So for my last question, Melvin, what keeps you inspired?
Oh man, what keeps me inspired? It's a good question. I think for me, it's just wanting us to be better, wanting to see people be better, be better in being themselves, and feeling what it feels like to be just happy and just be comfortable with who they are.
Yeah.
You know, I constantly, I'm very observant about the world around me. And, like a lot of people are too, I'm very observant. And there's just so much that goes on in this world that tries to tear us down, that tries to strip us of our confidence and, make us feel discouraged. And it's all these different variables that are working to tear us down. And, I see how that affects people.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I know that there's something inside of pretty much everybody that can overcome that, and that, they can find that part of their life where they can feel like, I'm happy to wake up every day.
Yes.
I'm happy and proud about who I am. I'm happy and proud about what I do.
Yeah.
And, I feel confident in saying what's on my mind, even if people don't agree with it.
Right.
This is what I believe. This is what I feel.
Yeah.
And so wanting to spread that to more people so that they can kind of get to this place where they're not just like living life just because like they kind of feel like they've living in their own purpose, and being the person they want to be no matter where they are, whether they're at work, whether with their family and their relationships, all those things. Like I want people to be able to achieve that and experience what it feels like.
Yeah.
So for me, it's that goal, and just me seeing, there's just people out here who are hurting. And so, I just want to be able to do, I'm only one person, so I can't help everybody, but
Sure.
just the goal of wanting to help where I can, because I've just seen how it transforms people. I've seen people's lives go from one place to the other, and they're like, I never thought I could feel like this.
Right.
I never thought I could like have these things in my life. And so that there, that's what does it for me. It's like seeing people, not say like giving me the credit, but feeling happy for once, and feeling like, wow, now I can actually take a breather and see my life for what it is and what it can be, not just what it has been.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, that's what keeps me going. Just wanting to accomplish that mission over and over.
That's beautiful. I love that. This has been so great. Guys, thank you for joining us today. Make sure you go to Melvin's Instagram page and check him out. And until next time, you guys, stay inspired.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me here.
Thank you.